Long before modern thrillers, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle gave us a hero unlike any other, Sherlock Holmes. A doctor by profession and a storyteller at heart, Doyle once served as a ship surgeon and battled personal losses through his writing. In Holmes, he found not just a character, but a companion of logic, wit, and unwavering curiosity. Today's tale, The Resident Patient, is a chilling mystery of trust, betrayal, and a hidden past that refuses to stay buried. If you enjoy timeless stories brought to life, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Now let's step into Baker Street and begin. This is the adventure of the resident patient. As I skimmed through the somewhat scattered memoirs I had written in an effort to highlight some of the unique traits of my friend, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I was struck by how hard it had been to select cases that fully served my purpose. In those instances where Holmes had showcased a brilliant display of analytical reasoning, proving the worth of his peculiar methods, the facts themselves had often been so minor or ordinary that I felt hesitant to present them to the public. On the other hand, there were times when the events were deeply dramatic and unusual, yet Holmes's own role in uncovering them wasn't as prominent as his biographer, might have wished. Cases like A Study in Scarlet and the later incident involving the loss of the Gloria Scott stand as examples of this constant tension between interest and involvement that every chronicler faces. It's possible that in the current case I'm about to recount, Holmes's role may not be emphasized enough. Still, the entire chain of events was so remarkable that I couldn't bring myself to leave it out of this collection. I'm unsure of the exact date, as some of my notes were lost, but it must have been late in the first year that Holmes and I shared our rooms on Baker Street. The October weather was blustery, and we had both remained indoors all day. Myself due to poor health, and Holmes because he was completely absorbed in one of those complex chemical experiments that often took over his entire attention. But by evening, a shattered test tube abruptly ended his work. He stood up suddenly from his chair, frowning with frustration.
A day's work ruined, Watson.
He crossed to the window.
Ah, the stars are out and the wind has dropped. What do you say to a walk through London?
I was tired of the sitting room and readily agreed. For the next 3 hours, we wandered together, observing the shifting scenes of life flowing through Fleet Street and the Strand. Holmes had shed his earlier bad mood, and his usual sharp observations and subtle deductions kept me entertained and fascinated. By the time we returned to Baker Street, it was 10 o'clock. A brougham was waiting outside our door.
A doctor's general practitioner, I'd say. New to the field, but clearly experienced. Likely here to consult us. Lucky we came back.
I knew Holmes's methods well enough to follow his thinking. The kind and condition of the medical instruments inside the wicker basket hanging in the lighted brougham had clearly given him the clues for that swift deduction. The light in our upstairs window confirmed that this unexpected visitor was indeed here for us. Curious about why a fellow doctor would visit us at such an hour, I followed Holmes into our study. A pale, thin-faced man with sandy whiskers stood up from his seat near the fire as we entered. Though he couldn't have been more than 43 or 44, his worn-out look and unhealthy complexion hinted at a life that had drained his energy and stolen his youth. His manner was shy and nervous, like that of a sensitive gentleman, and the thin white hand he rested on the mantelpiece had the grace of an artist more than a surgeon. He wore a quiet, somber outfit, a black frock coat, dark trousers, and just a touch of color in his necktie.
Good evening, Doctor. I'm glad to see you've only been waiting a few minutes.
You spoke to my coachman then?
No, it was the candle on the side table that told me. Please, have a seat and let me know how I can assist you.
My name is Dr. Percy Trevelyan, and I live at 403 Brook Street.
Are you not the author of a monograph on obscure nervous lesions? I asked, his pale cheeks flushed with pleasure, clearly surprised that someone recognized his work.
I so rarely hear anything about that book, I assumed it was completely forgotten. My publishers weren't optimistic about its sales. Are you, perhaps, a medical man yourself?
a retired army surgeon.
My own passion has always been nervous disorders. I'd love to specialize fully in them, but of course, at the start, one must take what comes. However, that's not why I'm here, Mr. Holmes, and I respect how valuable your time is. The fact is, something very strange has been happening at my home in Brook Street. Tonight, things escalated to a point where I felt I couldn't wait even one more hour before seeking your help.
Holmes sat down and lit his pipe.
You're very welcome to both my time and assistance. Please, give me a full account of the events that have disturbed you.
One or two of the incidents might seem so trivial that I'm almost embarrassed to mention them. But the entire situation has become so puzzling and recently so elaborate that I feel it's best to lay everything before you and let you decide what's relevant and what isn't. To explain properly, I have to begin with a bit about my academic background. I studied at London University, and I hope I won't sound boastful when I say that my professors consider my student career highly promising. After graduating, I remained focused on research while holding a junior position at King's College Hospital. I managed to gain some attention for my studies on the pathology of catalepsy, and eventually, I was awarded the Bruce Pinkerton Prize and medal for my monograph on nervous lesions, the same one your friend just mentioned. At that point, most people assumed a bright future awaited me. However, my biggest obstacle was the lack of capital. As you surely understand, a specialist aiming high must establish himself in one of the prestigious streets around Cavendish Square, where rents and furnishing costs are extremely high. Beyond that, he has to support himself for years and maintain the appearance of success, a respectable carriage and horse, for instance. That sort of investment was far beyond my means. I hoped that, through frugality, I might save enough in 10 years to finally open my own practice. But then something completely unexpected happened. One morning, a man named Blessington, whom I had never seen before, walked into my room and got straight to the point. He asked if I was the same Dr. Percy Trevelyan who had recently gained such distinction and won a major prize. I nodded. He went on to say that I had the intelligence needed for success, but did I have the tact? I couldn't help but smile at the bluntness of the question, but I told him I believed I had my share. Then he asked if I had any bad habits, especially if I drank. I was taken aback and expressed my surprise, but he quickly said he had to ask. After that, he asked why, with all my talents, I wasn't already in practice. I simply shrugged. With that, he exclaimed that it was the usual case, more brains than money, and asked what I'd say if he were to set me up in Brook Street. Naturally, I was stunned. He clarified that he wasn't doing it for me, but for himself. He explained that he had a few £1,000s he wanted to invest and thought I would be a safer bet than most other ventures. I asked what exactly I would have to do. He replied that he would handle everything. He'd rent the house, furnish it, pay the maids, and run the place. All I had to do was sit in the consulting room and see patients. He'd provide pocket money and cover other needs. In return, I would hand over 3/4 of my income, keeping 1/4 for myself. This was the strange proposal, Mr. Holmes, that Blessington brought to me. I won't tire you with the back and forth of our negotiations. In the end, I moved into the house on Lady Day and began my practice under terms very close to what he had initially proposed. Blessington moved in as well, posing as a resident patient. Apparently, he had a weak heart and needed constant supervision. He took over the 2 finest rooms on the first floor and converted them into his sitting room and bedroom. He was a peculiar man, avoided company, and almost never went out. His daily habits were inconsistent, except for one thing. Every evening, without fail, he would enter the consulting room, check the books, and take 5 shillings and 3pence from every guinea I had earned, depositing the rest into a strongbox in his room. I can confidently say that he never had any reason to regret his investment. From the very beginning, the practice was a success. A few notable cases, and the reputation I had earned from the hospital quickly brought me into prominence. Over the past few years, I've made him a wealthy man. That covers my background and my professional relationship with Mr. Blessington. Now let me tell you what brings me here tonight. A few weeks ago, Blessington came downstairs in what I could only describe as a state of deep agitation. He spoke about a burglary that had occurred in the West End, and to me, he seemed unnecessarily alarmed by it. He insisted we immediately install stronger bolts on our windows and doors. For a week after that, he was unusually restless, constantly peeking out the windows and skipping the short evening walk that always came before his dinner. It became obvious to me that he was terrified of someone or something. But when I tried to ask him directly, his reaction was so aggressively defensive that I had no choice but to drop the subject. Gradually, his anxiety began to fade, and he resumed his usual routines. That is, until something new happened, something that sent him into the shattered state he's in now. Here's what occurred. 2 days ago, I received a letter that I have here with me. It had no return address or date. The letter read that a Russian nobleman, currently living in England, was hoping to receive medical treatment from me. He claimed to suffer from cataleptic episodes, an area I'm known to specialize in. The note stated that he intended to visit me around 6:15 the following evening, if I would be available. This letter intrigued me, naturally. Catalepsy is incredibly rare, and any chance to study it more closely is of great interest to me. So, of course, I was in my consulting room at the designated hour when my page brought in the visitor. The patient was an older man, thin, quiet, and entirely unremarkable, not at all what one would picture when thinking of a Russian nobleman. What really caught my attention, though, was the man who accompanied him. He was young and strikingly handsome, with a dark, intense face and the powerful build of Hercules. As they entered, he supported the older man gently by the arm and helped him to a chair with a kind of tenderness one wouldn't expect from such a fierce-looking figure. He apologized for entering with his father, explaining, in slightly lisped English, that his father's health was of the utmost importance to him. I was genuinely touched by his concern. I asked if he would prefer to stay during the consultation. The young man reacted with what seemed like genuine horror. He insisted that under no circumstances could he stay in the room. Watching his father suffer one of those dreadful seizures, he claimed, would be more than he could bear. His own nervous system, he said, was unusually delicate. He asked for permission to wait in the outer room during the consultation. Naturally, I agreed, and he withdrew. I then began a thorough discussion of the case with the patient, taking detailed notes as we went along. The man didn't show much intelligence, and his answers were often vague, something I attributed to his weak grasp of English. Then suddenly, in the middle of our exchange, he stopped responding altogether. I looked up from my writing and was startled to see him sitting completely upright in the chair, staring at me with a blank, rigid expression. He had clearly fallen into one of his cataleptic episodes. My first emotion, I must admit, was a mix of pity and shock. But professionally, I saw it as an opportunity. I recorded his pulse and temperature, tested his muscle stiffness, and checked his reflexes. Nothing appeared unusual. Everything aligned with what I had encountered in similar cases before. I had previously achieved positive results with inhalation of amyl nitrite, and this seemed like the perfect situation to test its effects again. The bottle, however, was in my downstairs lab. So I left him in the chair and went down to retrieve it. It took me about 5 minutes to locate it. When I returned, I was stunned to find the consulting room completely empty. The patient was gone. Of course, my first thought was to check the waiting room, but the young man was gone too. The front door had been pulled to, but not firmly closed. My page, who's new and not the quickest, waits downstairs and only comes up when I ring for him. He had heard nothing. The whole thing was a complete mystery. Blessington came in from his usual walk shortly after, but I didn't mention the incident. Truth be told, I had grown accustomed to avoiding conversation with him as much as possible. I never expected to see the supposed Russian nobleman or his son again. So you can imagine my astonishment when, at precisely the same time this evening, they both returned to my consulting room, just as before. The elderly man apologized profusely for the abrupt departure the day before. I admitted I had been quite surprised by it. He explained that after such seizures, his memory always became clouded. He had awoken in a strange room, utterly disoriented, and had wandered out into the street while I was gone. The son added that when he saw his father walk past the waiting room, he simply assumed the consultation had ended. It wasn't until they got home that he realized something wasn't right. I laughed and told them no real harm had been done, though their sudden exit had certainly puzzled me. I asked the young man once again to wait outside so I could resume the consultation. For another half hour, I discussed the older man's symptoms and wrote a prescription before they finally left, the son once again supporting him out. As I've mentioned, Blessington always went for a walk around this time. He returned shortly after and went upstairs. But only a moment later, I heard him running back down, bursting into my consulting room in a state of absolute panic. He demanded to know who had been in his room. I told him no one, but he shouted that it was a lie and insisted I come see for myself. Though his language was offensive, I let it pass, recognizing that he was practically out of his mind with fear. I followed him upstairs, and he pointed to several fresh footprints on the light-colored carpet. He asked whether I thought those prints were his. Clearly, they were much too large to have been made by him, and from the wetness, it was obvious they were fresh, left that very afternoon. It had rained heavily, and only the so-called Russian and his son had been to the house. It was then clear that, for reasons unknown, the man waiting outside had somehow gone upstairs to Blessington's private quarters while I was with the supposed patient. Nothing appeared to have been taken, but the footprints left no doubt that someone had definitely been there. Mr. Blessington seemed more upset about the whole thing than I ever would have expected, though, to be fair, it was enough to shake anyone up. He was actually sitting in an armchair crying, and I could barely get a clear word out of him. It was his idea that I should come to you, and of course, I immediately saw the sense in that because, strange as the incident is, he definitely seems to be blowing away out of proportion. If you'd be willing to come back with me in my carriage, I'm sure your presence would at least help calm him down. Though honestly, I doubt even you can fully explain what happened.
Sherlock Holmes had listened to the entire account with a focused intensity that made it clear just how deeply engaged he was. Though his face stayed as unreadable as ever, his eyelids drooped lower than usual, and the smoke from his pipe rose in thicker curls, subtly punctuating each curious part of the doctor's story. As soon as our visitor finished, Holmes jumped up without a word, handed me my hat, grabbed his own from the table, and followed Dr. Trevelyan to the door. Within 15 minutes, we were stepping out of a cab in front of the physician's residence on Brook Street, a somber, flat-fronted house like many others typical of a West End practice. A young page opened the door, and we began to climb the wide, soft-carpeted stairs. But then something unexpected stopped us in our tracks. The light at the top of the stairs was suddenly extinguished, and a thin, shaky voice called out from the darkness.
"I have a pistol. I swear I'll shoot if you come any closer."
This is really going too far, Mr. Blessington.
"Oh, it's you, Doctor. Thank goodness. But those other gentlemen, are they who they claim to be?"
We could sense a long, careful examination from the shadows above.
Yes, it's all right. You may come up. I'm sorry if my precautions upset you."
As he spoke, he lit the gas lamp on the stairway again. Before us stood a peculiar-looking man whose shaken nerves were evident both in his appearance and his voice. He was very overweight, but had clearly once been even larger. His loose, sagging skin hung from his face like the jowls of a bloodhound. His complexion was pale and unhealthy, and his thin, sandy hair stood on end, likely from anxiety. Though he held a pistol in one hand, he quickly shoved it into his pocket as we approached.
"Good evening, Mr. Holmes. I truly appreciate you coming. I doubt anyone has ever needed your help more than I do. I imagine Dr. Trevelyan has already told you about the outrageous intrusion into my rooms."
He did indeed. Who are these two men, Mr. Blessington, and why would they want to harass you?
Well, it's not so easy to say, you know. Honestly, Mr. Holmes, I'm not sure I can answer that.
You mean you don't know?
"Come in here, please. Just step in here for a moment."
He led us into his bedroom, a spacious and well-furnished room.
"Look at that,"
he said, pointing to a large black box at the foot of his bed.
"I've never been a wealthy man, Mr. Holmes. Only made one investment in my life. Dr. Trevelyan can vouch for that. But I've never trusted banks. Never have, never will. Between you and me, whatever little I've got is in that box. So, I hope you understand why it's terrifying when strangers force their way into my rooms.
Holmes gave Blessington his signature questioning stare and slowly shook his head.
I won't be able to help you if you're not being truthful.
But I have told you everything.
Holmes turned sharply on his heel, visibly disgusted.
Good night, Dr. Trevelyan.
And no advice for me?
My advice to you, sir, is to speak the truth.
A minute later, we were back out on the street, walking toward home. We had crossed Oxford Street and were halfway down Harley Street before Holmes finally broke his silence.
Sorry to drag you out on such a fool's errand, Watson. Though, beneath it all, it's quite an intriguing case.
I honestly can't make much sense of it.
Well, it's clear enough that there are at least two men, maybe more, who are determined, for some unknown reason, to get at Blessington. I'm convinced that on both occasions, that young man made it into Blessington's room, while his accomplice used some clever trick to keep the doctor occupied.
And what about the catalepsy?
A fake, Watson. A very convincing one, but a fake nonetheless. I wouldn't dare say that to our specialist, though. It's a remarkably easy condition to mimic. I've done it myself.
And then?
Pure coincidence that Blessington wasn't home both times. Their choice of such a strange consultation hour was clearly to avoid any other patients being around. Unfortunately for them, it happened to be the same time Blessington took his daily walk. That suggests they didn't know his routine very well. If they were just thieves, they would have at least tried to search the place. But no, they were after something, or someone specific. I can tell by the look in a man's eye when it's his own skin he's scared for. No way someone ends up with two vengeful enemies like this without knowing why. That means he doesn't know who they are, and he's hiding it. With any luck, he'll be more open tomorrow.
Isn't there one other possibility? It sounds ridiculous, but still. What if the entire story about the cataleptic Russian and his son was made up by Dr. Trevelyan, who, for some reason, has been in Blessington's room himself? In the dim glow of the gaslight, I saw an amused smile spread across Holmes's face at my far-fetched suggestion.
My dear fellow, that was actually one of the first theories I considered, but I quickly found proof supporting the doctor's story. That young man left clear footprints on the stair carpet, so I didn't even need to check for prints inside the room. When I tell you that his shoes were square-toed, not pointed like Blessington's, and more than an inch and a third longer than the doctor's, you'll agree he was someone else entirely. But let's sleep on it. I'll be surprised if we don't get fresh news from Brook Street by morning.
Holmes's prediction came true, dramatically so. By 7:30 the next morning, in the faint light of dawn, I found him standing by my bed in his dressing gown.
There's a brougham waiting for us, Watson.
What's happened?
The Brook Street case.
Any new developments?
Tragic, but unclear.
He said, pulling up the window blind.
Look at this, a page torn from a notebook with a message. For God's sake, come at once. PT, scrawled in pencil. The doctor must have been in real distress when he wrote this. Let's go, my friend. It's urgent.
Within 15 minutes, we were back at the physician's house. Dr. Trevelyan ran out to greet us, panic written all over his face.
Oh, it's awful. Just awful.
What happened?
Blessington has committed suicide.
Holmes let out a low whistle.
Yes, he hanged himself during the night.
We stepped inside, and the doctor led us into what was clearly his waiting room.
I can barely think straight. The police are already upstairs. I've been terribly shaken.
When did you discover it?
He has tea brought to him early every morning. When the maid came in, around 7, she found him hanging in the middle of the room. He'd tied a cord to the hook where the heavy lamp used to hang and jumped from the very box he showed us yesterday.
Holmes stood silently, lost in deep thought.
With your permission, I'd like to go upstairs and examine the situation.
The three of us ascended together. What we saw inside the bedroom was horrifying. I had previously mentioned the impression of looseness and flabbiness that Blessington gave off, but now, as he dangled from the ceiling hook, that impression was grotesquely amplified. His neck was stretched unnaturally, like that of a plucked chicken, making the rest of his body look even bulkier by contrast. He wore only a long nightshirt, with swollen ankles and awkward feet protruding stiffly from beneath it. Beside the body stood a sharply dressed police inspector, jotting down notes in a small notebook.
Ah, Mr. Holmes. I'm truly glad to see you.
Good morning, Lanner. I trust you don't consider me an intruder. Have you heard what led up to this situation?
Yes, I've heard a bit.
And have you reached any conclusions?
From what I can tell, the man went mad from fear. The bed's clearly been slept in. Look at the deep impression. Suicides usually happen around 5 a.m., and that would line up with the time of death. Seems like a carefully planned suicide to me.
I should say that he has been dead about 3 hours, judging by the rigidity of the muscles.
Notice anything odd about the room?
Found a screwdriver and some screws on the washstand. He seems to have smoked quite a bit last night. I picked up 4 cigar ends from the fireplace.
Do you have a cigar holder?
No, haven't seen one.
How about his cigar case?
Yes, that was in his coat pocket.
Holmes opened the case and took a sniff of the single cigar inside.
This is a Havana, but those other cigars, those are a specific type imported by the Dutch from their East Indian colonies. They're usually wrapped in straw and thinner than typical cigars.
He picked up the 4 ends and inspected them through his pocket lens.
2 of these were smoked using a holder, 2 without. 2 ends were cut with a dull knife, and 2 were bitten cleanly, with excellent teeth. This was no suicide, Mr. Lanner. This was a carefully staged, cold-blooded murder.
Impossible.
And why?
Why would anyone kill a man by hanging him? It's such a clumsy method.
That's what we need to find out.
But how could they even get in?
Through the front door.
It was barred this morning.
Then they barred it behind them.
And how do you know that?
I saw their traces. Give me a moment. I may be able to offer you more details shortly.
Holmes walked over to the door and methodically examined the lock. He then removed the key from the inside and inspected that as well. One by one, he studied the bed, the carpet, the chairs, the mantelpiece, the corpse, and the rope. Finally, he appeared satisfied and, with help from both the inspector and me, we cut down the poor body and respectfully laid it beneath a sheet.
How about this rope?
It's from this coil.
He said, pulling out a large bundle from under the bed.
He had a morbid fear of fire and kept it nearby so he could escape through the window if the stairs were burning.
That must have saved them the trouble. Yes, the facts themselves are quite straightforward, and I believe I'll be able to explain them all by this afternoon. I'll take this photograph of Blessington from the mantel. It might help with my inquiries.
But you've told us nothing.
Oh, there's little doubt about the sequence of events. 3 men were involved, the young man, the older man, and a third individual whose identity I haven't yet uncovered. The first 2, of course, are the same who posed as the Russian count and his son. So we have good descriptions. They were let in by an accomplice inside the house. If I may suggest something, Inspector, I think you should arrest the page boy. As I understand, Doctor, he joined your staff only recently?
The rascal's gone missing. The maid and cook just searched for him.
Then he's played a more significant part than we thought. The 3 ascended the stairs on tiptoe. The elder man first, the younger second, and the unknown third.
My dear Holmes.
There's no doubt the footprints overlapped exactly. I had the advantage of identifying each type last night. They reached Blessington's door, which was locked, but using a wire, they rotated the key from the other side. Even without a magnifying glass, you can see the scratch marks from the pressure.
Upon entering, their first action must have been to gag Blessington. He may have been asleep or so petrified with fear that he couldn't scream. The walls were thick, and any cry would have likely gone unheard.
Once they subdued him, they held a sort of tribunal, a mock trial, I believe. It must have gone on for a while, judging by the cigars. The older man sat in that wicker chair and used the cigar holder. The younger sat across the room, flicking ash against the dresser. The third man paced back and forth. Blessington, I assume, sat upright in bed, though I can't be certain. Eventually, they decided to hang him. I believe they brought along a block or pulley system to serve as a makeshift gallows. The screwdriver and screws were probably meant for setting it up, but upon spotting the existing hook, they saved themselves the effort. Once finished, they left, and their accomplice barred the door behind them.
We had all listened with the deepest interest to this sketch of the night's doings, which Holmes had deduced from signs so subtle and minute that, even when he had pointed them out to us, we could scarcely follow him in his reasoning. The inspector hurried away on the instant to make inquiries about the page, while Holmes and I returned to Baker Street for breakfast.
I'll be back by 3. Both the inspector and doctor will meet me here, and by then, I expect to have solved the final pieces of this mystery.
Our guests arrived at the appointed hour, but Holmes didn't show up until 15 minutes later. From his satisfied look on his face, I knew he had achieved what he set out to do.
Any news, Inspector?
We found the boy, sir.
Excellent. And I found the men.
All three of us reacted at once, overwhelmed with relief and excitement the moment we realized Holmes had caught them. The tension that had been building for so long finally broke, and our faces lit up with disbelief and triumph.
At least I've uncovered their identities. This man, Blessington, as I suspected, is well known at headquarters. His real name was Sutton. His attackers, Biddle, Hayward, and Moffat.
The Worthington Bank Gang.
Exactly.
Then Blessington was Sutton.
That's correct.
Well, that clears it up completely.
The doctor and I exchanged confused looks.
You must remember the Worthington Bank affair. 5 men were involved, these 3, another named Cartwright, and a 5th, Tobin, the caretaker who was murdered. The thieves escaped with £7,000 in 1875. All 5 were arrested, but the evidence was weak. Sutton, our Blessington, was the worst of the lot, but he turned informer. His testimony got Cartwright hanged, and the others 15-year sentences. Once they were released, early by the way, they sought revenge. Twice they failed to reach him. The 3rd time, they succeeded. Anything more I can clarify, Dr. Trevelyan?
You've made everything remarkably clear. The day he was so agitated must have been when he read about their release in the papers.
Exactly. His talk of burglary was just a smokescreen.
But why didn't he tell you the truth?
Because he feared the vengeance of his former gang. He wanted to keep his identity hidden as long as possible. His past was shameful, and he couldn't bring himself to reveal it. Still, as vile as he was, he lived under the protection of British law. And while that shield may have failed to protect him, the sword of justice is still there to avenge him.
And so ended the strange case of the resident patient and the Brook Street doctor. Since that night, the 3 murderers have vanished from all police records. Scotland Yard believed they were aboard the ill-fated steamer Nora Creina, which sank with all hands off the Portuguese coast near Oporto. As for the page boy, the case against him collapsed due to lack of evidence. And the mystery, known publicly as the Brook Street Mystery, has never before been revealed in such full detail. Until now. And so, another mystery is laid to rest beneath the weight of truth. In a world where shadows often hide more than they reveal, Sherlock Holmes reminds us that even the darkest secrets cannot withstand the light of reason. If this story stirred your imagination, we invite you to explore more timeless tales right here on Echoes of Stories. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and tap the bell icon so you never miss another journey into the heart of mystery. Until next time, stay curious, because every whisper of the past echoes into a story waiting to be heard.